The air was crisp as I pulled on my cat costume, adjusting the black ears that poked through my hair. Halloween had always been my favorite night of the year, and this year was no different. My friends and I had been looking forward to this night for weeks, mapping out our trick-or-treating route, and planning how to scare each other along the way. As I joined my friends Mia and Sarah outside my house, the evening was alive with laughter and excitement. Pumpkins carved into grinning faces lined the sidewalks, and the smell of fallen leaves mixed with the sweet scent of candy, ready to hit the streets. Mia asked, her fairy wings shimmering under the streetlights. "Absolutely," I replied, clutching my orange pumpkin bucket tightly. We set off, the sound of our footsteps crunching on leaves filling the air. The neighborhood was vibrant, each house adorned with spooky decorations that brought an electrifying thrill. We collected candy quickly, our buckets growing heavy with treats, and soon we found ourselves at the end of our planned route. "Let's go to that house," Sarah pointed to a large old Victorian at the edge of the neighborhood. It was notorious for its creepy reputation. The windows were always dark, and the garden was overgrown with weeds. "No way! That place is haunted!" I protested, remembering the stories I'd heard from older kids. "Come on, it's just a house," Mia urged. What's Halloween without a little scare? After a moment of hesitation, the thrill of adventure pulled me in. "Okay, but just for a quick look," I said, glancing back at the other houses where kids were still trick-or-treating. We approached the house, the porch creaking ominously under our weight. The front door stood slightly ajar, as if inviting us in. "Is anyone home?" Mia called out, her voice wavering slightly. When there was no response, we exchanged nervous glances. "Let's just peek inside," Sarah suggested, pushing the door open wider, stepping into the dimly lit foyer. I felt a shiver run down my spine. The air was thick with dust and the faint scent of mildew. Cobwebs hung from the corners, and the floorboards creaked beneath our feet. "This place is seriously creepy," I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady as we explored the ground floor. We found remnants of what seemed like a long-abandoned home. Faded photographs lined the walls, depicting somber faces from another era. "Who lived here?" Mia wondered aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. "Probably some old lady who died alone," I joked, trying to lighten the mood, but my voice quivered slightly, betraying my fear. We moved cautiously through the living room. Furniture lay covered in sheets like ghosts waiting to be released. "Let's check upstairs," Sarah suggested, her eyes gleaming with mischief. "Are you crazy? We shouldn't be here," I protested, but deep down, curiosity gnawed at me. Reluctantly, I followed them up the narrow staircase, the wood groaning under our weight. The air grew colder as we ascended, and I felt a chill creep over my skin. At the top, a long hallway stretched before us, dimly lit by the moonlight streaming through the dusty windows. A door at the end of the hall caught my attention, slightly ajar. "Let's see what's inside," Mia exclaimed, already moving toward it. "Wait, what if something is in there?" I said, my heart racing. "Oh, come on, don't be a chicken," Sarah teased, nudging me forward. We reached the door, and I felt a sense of foreboding wash over me. I glanced back at the staircase, half expecting to see someone, or something, waiting for us, but it was just shadows, deep and ominous. Mia pushed the door open, revealing a dimly lit room filled with old furniture covered in dust. A large, ornate mirror stood against one wall, its surface cloudy and dark. "It's like a time capsule," Mia whispered, stepping inside as I entered. The room, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The air was still, heavy, with an inexplicable weight. "Let's not stay too long," I suggested nervously, but as I turned to leave, a soft whisper echoed through the room. "Help me." I froze, my heart pounding. "Did you guys hear that?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Hear what?" Sarah asked, looking puzzled. I think I heard someone," I stammered, my gaze darting around the room. Mia stepped closer to the mirror, her reflection distorted in the murky surface. "It's just your imagination, Jess. Let's take a selfie." She pulled out her phone and posed in front of the mirror, but as the flash went off, the atmosphere shifted. The whisper grew louder, clearer. "Help me." Panic flooded through me. "We need to go, now," I shouted, grabbing Mia's arm before I could react. The mirror rippled as if a hand had pressed against it from the inside. I stumbled back, gasping. Then the whisper transformed into a low, eerie laugh. Guys, please, let's get out, I begged, my heart racing, but Sarah, entranced by the mirror, took a step closer. What if it's just a trick? There's no one here, she said, her voice almost dreamy. No, don't touch it, I screamed, grabbing her arm just as her fingers brushed the surface. The mirror pulsed with dark energy, and a cold wind surged through the room, extinguishing the faint light. I felt the world tilt as shadows enveloped us, swirling and pressing in from all sides. I yelled, pulling Sarah and Mia with me as I bolted for the door. We stumbled into the hallway, panting, the laughter still echoing behind us. What just happened? Mia gasped, her face pale. I don't know, but we need to get out of here, I urged, adrenaline fueling my legs as we raced down the stairs. But as we reached the bottom, the door slammed shut with a loud bang. We whipped around, terror gripping us. It's locked, Sarah cried, tugging on the doorknob frantically. Don't panic. There has to be another way out, I shouted, scanning the room for an exit in that moment of chaos. The shadows seemed to coalesce into a figure in the doorway, the outline indistinct but menacing. You shouldn't have come here, it whispered, the voice chilling me to the bone. I felt my heart drop as I realized we were trapped. Mia, find a window, I shouted, darting toward the back of the house, my friends following close behind. We rushed through the darkened rooms, desperately searching for a way out. I could feel the presence behind us, growing stronger, the air thickening with dread. Finally, we reached a window, and I threw it open, the cool night air flooding in. Help! Somebody help us! I yelled, hoping someone outside could hear. Jess, hurry! Sarah urged, pushing me to climb through. I scrambled onto the windowsill, my heart racing, and with one final glance back, I saw the shadow drawing closer, its features sharpening into something more grotesque and monstrous. Go! I screamed, shoving Sarah and Mia through the window. They tumbled onto the ground outside, and I followed right after them, landing awkwardly on the grass. We stumbled away from the house, fear propelling us forward as we sprinted down the street, not daring to look back. When we finally reached the safety of the streetlights, we collapsed on the curb, gasping for breath. What was that? What just happened? Mia panted, her eyes wide with shock. I don't know, I replied, shaking, but we're never going back there again. As we caught our breath, the distant sounds of laughter and trick-or-treating filled the air again, reminding us that Halloween was still alive outside the horror we had just experienced. I'm just glad we're safe, Sarah said, her voice trembling. Me too, I agreed, glancing back at the house that now loomed in the distance, dark and silent. It was supposed to be a night of fun, but the shadows of that haunted Victorian would stay with us long after the last of the candy was eaten. And as we walked home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed us from that place, a whisper in and dark, a promise that we had only just begun to understand the terror of Halloween. It was Halloween night in Southern California, and the streets were alive with the sounds of laughter, rustling leaves, and distant screams of joy. The sun had set hours ago, replaced by a harvest moon casting a silver-hot glow over the neighborhood. Jack, a 10-year-old with a wild imagination and a love for adventure, eagerly adjusted the mask of his pirate costume, the fabric slightly scratchy against his skin. Mom, I'm ready, he called, his voice filled with excitement. His mother, standing at the front door, smiled warmly at him. Okay, buddy, just remember to stick to the houses on our block and come home before 8. And don't eat too much candy, Jack promised, grinning. He clutched his plastic pumpkin bucket, its orange surface glinting in the moonlight, as he set out. The neighborhood was a kaleidoscope of colors and sound. Kids of all ages, adorned in costumes ranging from frock superheroes to ghosts, filled the sidewalks. Jack joined a group of friends, their laughter echoing through the cool night air. Let's hit that house first, his friend Alex shouted, pointing to a lavishly decorated home with cobwebs draping from the eaves, and eerie green lights flickering in the windows. They ran up the driveway, and Jack knocked on the door. A moment later, it swung open, revealing an elderly woman dressed as a witch. Happy Halloween, darlings, she cackled, dropping handfuls of candy into their buckets. Thank you, they chorused, excitement bubbling over as they raced back to the sidewalk. Jack was having the time of his life, house after house. They collected candy and admired the decorations. As they moved further down the street, however, The atmosphere began to change. The houses became fewer and the laughter of children faded. "Let's check out that creepy house," Alex suggested, pointing to a dilapidated Victorian at the end of the block. It stood alone, surrounded by a rusty hire fence and overgrown bushes. Jack had heard stories about the house, how it was haunted by the spirit of a woman who had died there years ago. "Are you sure?" Jack hesitated, glancing at the other kids. "Come on, it'll be fun," another friend, Lucy, urged. What's Halloween without a little scare? With a mix of excitement and apprehension, they approached the house. The wooden door creaked open, revealing a dark hallway filled with cobwebs and shadows. "Hello? Hello?" Jack called, his voice trembling slightly. There was no answer, just the soft rustling of leaves outside. "Let's go inside," Alex dared, and one by one they stepped into the darkness. The door swinging shut behind them with a thud. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and the smell of mildew clung to the walls. Their flashlights flickered, illuminating faded portraits hanging crookedly on the walls, images of solemn-looking people who seemed to watch them with hollow eyes. "Do you think she's really here?" Lucy whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know," Jack replied, feeling a chill run down his spine. "Maybe we should go back." "Just a little longer," Alex insisted, moving deeper into the house. They wandered through the dimly lit rooms, each one more unsettling than the last. In one, they found a broken piano, its keys yellowed and silent. In another, a dusty old mirror reflected their frightened faces. Jack felt an overwhelming sense of unease, but didn't want to seem scared in front of his friends. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from the upstairs, making them all jump. "What was that?" Lucy gasped, gripping Jack's arm tightly. "Probably just the wind," Jack said, trying to sound braver than he felt. "Let's check it out." With hesitant steps, they made their way to the staircase. The wooden steps creaked beneath their weight, and the darkness above seemed to stretch endlessly. The air grew colder as they reached the top, and Jack shivered, wishing he was back outside, collecting candy. At the end of the hallway, they found a door slightly ajar. Taking a deep breath, Jack pushed it open, revealing a dimly lit room. The moonlight streamed in through the dusty window, casting eerie shadows on the floor. Alex exclaimed, pointing to an old rocking chair that swayed gently back and forth, as if someone had just been sitting there. "That's creepy." Just then the chair stopped moving, and the room fell silent. Jack's heart raced as he scanned area, feeling the weight of unseen eyes upon him. "We should go," he urged. But before they could leave, a cold breeze swept through the room, making the curtains flutter violently. "Did you feel that?" Lucy squeaked, backing away. "Let's just get out of here," Jack said, turning to flee. But as he moved toward the door, it slammed shut in front of him. "No! Open it!" he shouted, panic rising in his chest, his voice filled with fear. "What do we do?" Just then, a soft, haunting melody filled the air, coming from somewhere deep within the house. It was a lullaby, echoing through the halls, weaving a spell of dread and enchantment. "Follow the sound," Lucy cried, her eyes wide with terror, despite the fear clawing at him. Jack felt a strange compulsion to move forward. They stumbled through the dim hallway, following the haunting melody, until they reached another door. This one, unlike the others, was wide open. As they stepped inside, the atmosphere shifted. The room was filled with toys, old dolls, a dusty rocking horse, and scattered stuffed animals, all eerily preserved as if waiting for a child to play. But what caught their attention was a small figure standing in the corner, its back turned to them. "Is someone there?" Jack called, his voice trembling. The figure turned slowly, revealing a girl in a tattered white dress with dark hair hanging over her face. Her eyes were hollow and haunting, and she stared at them with an expression that sent chills down Jack's spine. "Play with me," she whispered, her voice soft yet unsettling. Jack's instincts screamed at him to run, but he felt rooted to the spot. We should go," he stammered, trying to back away. But the girl stepped forward, her presence growing more menacing. "Don't you want to play?" she asked, her tone sweet but edged with malice. Suddenly, the room grew colder, and the lullaby intensified, reverberating off the walls. Jack glanced at his friends, who looked equally terrified. "Get out!" Jack yelled, shoving past the girl and racing toward the door. Wait, Alex shouted, but Jack was already out of the room, sprinting down the hall, the others following closely behind. The front door was just ahead, but as they neared it, the walls seemed to close in, and the air thickened with dread. Girls' laughter echoed behind them, a chilling sound that urged them to move faster. With a final push, Jack reached the door, throwing it open and bursting into the night. They stumbled into the cool air, gasping for breath as they sprinted it down the driveway and onto the street. "Did you see that?" Lucy cried, her voice shaking. "What was that?" Alex panted, glancing back at the house, now looming ominously in the moonlight. "I don't know," Jack said, his heart pounding. "But we need to get away from here." They raced down the street, not stopping until they reached the safety of their neighborhood. The sounds of Halloween, the laughter, the music, the distant crackle of fireworks began to drown out the memory of the haunted house. They finally slowed down, panting heavily, as they reached the edge of their block. "Let's just go trick-or-treating again," Jack suggested, trying to shake off the fear that still gripped him. "Are you crazy?" Lucy exclaimed, eyes wide with disbelief. "I'm not going back there." "Yeah, let's just go home," Alex agreed, glancing over his shoulder as if expecting the girl to appear behind them. "Come on, it was probably just our imagination," Jack insisted, though he wasn't sure he believed it himself. Reluctantly, the group began to split up, each kid heading toward their own homes. Jack lingered, watching as his friends walked away, the thrill of the night replaced with an eerie unease. As he turned to walk home, he felt a cold breeze brush against his skin, making him shiver. The moon hung high in the sky, a silent witness to the events of the night. When he finally reached his house, he stepped inside, the warmth of the living room comforting in contrast to the chill of the night. His were stowaway, the night to see. His mother was waiting, a smile on her face. "How was it, Jack?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with joy. "Great," he said, forcing a smile. He didn't want to frighten her with the stories of what had happened. As he settled down with a pile of candy, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had left something behind, a part of himself still trapped in that haunted house, forever entwined with the girl in the tattered dress. That night, as he lay in bed, the echoes of the lullaby haunted his dreams. He closed his eyes, hoping to forget the chilling encounter, but deep down he knew that Halloween was not just a night. Halloween Drive. The moon hung low over the city, casting an eerie glow that illuminated the streets lined with pumpkins and decorations. It was Halloween night, and as a young man with a taste for adventure, I found myself driving through the heart of the city, searching for that thrill that comes with the supernatural. My name's Jake. After a few hours of attending parties and visiting haunted houses with friends, I decided to take a break from the festivities and drive around to clear my head. My friends had been eager to hit the clubs, but I craved solitude, a quiet moment to reflect on the magic of the night. I rolled down my window, letting the cool October breeze whip through my hair as I cruised down the empty streets. The sounds of laughter and distant music faded, replaced by the occasional rustle of leaves, and the distant echo of footsteps. I turned on the radio, the eerie tunes of Halloween theme songs adding to the atmosphere. "Just me and the night," I muttered to myself, enjoying the feeling of freedom that came with driving alone. I took a few turns passing through neighborhoods dressed in elaborate decorations. Ghosts hung from trees, skeletons danced in yards, and kids dressed as witches and superheroes scurried from door to door. The streets were alive, yet a strange feeling gnawed at me. That something was off, just beneath the surface. As I drove deeper into the city, I came across a stretch of road I had never taken before. The streetlights flickered, casting long shadows that danced along the pavement. Curiosity piqued. I decided to explore. What's the worst that could happen? I thought, a smirk creeping onto my face. The road wound deeper into the city, leading me away from the noise and lights. It was quiet here. Too quiet here. Too quiet. The buildings loomed over me, their darkened windows staring like vacant eyes. A chill ran down my spine, but I brushed it off, reminding myself it was just Halloween. Suddenly, I saw something in the distance, a figure standing on the sidewalk. I slowed down, squinting through the darkness. It was a young woman dressed in a tattered white gown that billowed in the breeze. Her hair was wild, and her face was obscured by shadows. I rolled down my window, feeling a mixture of intrigue and concern. "Hey, are you okay?" I called out, my voice echoing into the stillness. She turned to face me, her expression unreadable. "Help me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. My heart raced. "What happened?" I asked, my instinct to help kicking in. "I need to get home," she said, her voice trembling. "I can't remember how I got here." I hesitated for a moment, scanning the empty street around us. Something felt wrong, but it was Halloween. People dressed up to scare others. "Get in," I finally said, motioning for her to come closer. She hesitated before opening the passenger door and sliding into the seat beside me. "Thank you," she murmured, her eyes darting around as if she were searching for something. "What's your name?" I asked, trying to break the silence. "Lila," she replied, glancing at me with a nervous smile. "Okay, Lila, where do you live?" I asked, hoping to make sense of this odd encounter. "Just take me home," she said, her voice laced with urgency. "Please." I nodded, pulling away from the curb and back onto the main road. The atmosphere felt heavier now, like an unseen weight pressing down on us. I asked, trying to keep the conversation going. "I don't know," she replied, her eyes wide with panic. "I just need to get away from here." That's when I noticed something strange in the rear view. A shadow moved behind us, flickering in and out of sight. I glanced back, but the road was empty. Just my imagination, I thought, trying to brush it off. "Are you okay?" I asked again, concern creeping into my voice. I can't remember," she whispered, her hands shaking. I turned down another street, looking for any signs of life, any familiar landmarks. "Well, figure it out," I reassured her. "Just try to relax." As I navigated through the dimly lit streets, I caught sight of the shadow again, a figure that seemed to be following us. I squinted into the darkness, my heart pounding in my chest. She turned to look, her expression morphing from confusion to fear. What is it?" "There's someone behind us," I said, gripping the steering wheel tighter. No, just drive," she cried, her voice rising in panic. I pressed the accelerator, the engine roaring as I tried to put distance between us and the unseen follower. My mind raced as I turned corners, desperately searching for a way out. "Where do you live?" I demanded, hoping for a clear answer that could lead me to safety. "I don't know. Just keep going." The shadow flickered again, darting closer. I felt a chill wash over me, a sense of impending doom creeping into my bones. I could see it more clearly now. A dark figure, indistinct yet menacing, moving swiftly, as if gliding just above the ground. I took a sharp turn, my tires squealing, and the figure vanished momentarily. My breath came in short gasps, adrenaline coursing through my veins. "This isn't real," I told myself. "Jake, please, just drive." I pushed the pedal down further, the speedometer climbing as I tore through the empty streets. Suddenly I saw a flicker of light ahead. A gas station, its neon sign glowing like a beacon of hope. "There, let's go. I turned toward the station, my heart racing with the possibility of safety. As we approached, I glanced back one last time. The figure was closer now, a shadowy presence that seemed to stretch unnaturally, its features obscured by darkness. I slammed the brakes and jumped out of the car, grabbing Lila's arm. "We have to run," I shouted, pulling her toward the gas station. But as we reached the entrance, the door slammed shut in our faces. I banged on the glass, desperation rising. "Let us in!" Inside, a figure stood behind the counter, their back turned. I felt the cold grip of fear tighten around me. "Please," I yelled, pounding on the door. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and the figure inside turned slowly to face us. I gasped as I recognized the face, an old man with hollow eyes and a sinister smile. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, voice echoing with an unsettling calm. "Open the door," I screamed, but he just laughed, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. In that moment, I felt a presence behind me, a cold breath on my neck. I spun around, and there it was, the shadow. It loomed over us, its form shifting, becoming more defined. Lila shrieked, backing away, her face pale with terror. "Get back!" I shouted, stepping in front of her. But the shadow reached out, fingers elongated and grasping, and I felt a jolt of cold shoot through me as it brushed against my arm. I stumbled back, the world spinning around me. I could feel its weight, its darkness suffocating me. "Run," Lila screamed, but my feet felt glued to the ground. I couldn't think, couldn't breathe as the shadow loomed closer, its laughter echoing in my ears. Everything went dark for a moment, and then I found myself falling, tumbling into an abyss of nothingness. And then, light, I gasped, awakening in the driver's seat of my car, my heart racing, beads of sweat trickling down my forehead. I was parked in front of my apartment, the night quiet and still, my mind racing with confusion. I glanced to the passenger seat, expecting to see Lila, but it was empty. Had it all been a dream? I shook my head, trying to shake off the remnants of fear. I stepped out of the car, my legs shaky, and walked toward the entrance of my building. As I turned to look back at the street, I noticed something. A figure standing at the edge of the figure. Darkness watching me. It was there again. The shadow. I froze, my heart dropping as I realized that this wasn't over. I bolted for the entrance, fumbling with my keys, desperate to escape. But as I turned the key in the lock, I felt cold breath on my neck again. I whirled around, but the street was empty, the figure gone. I rushed inside, locking the door behind me, panting heavily. The safety of the building felt tenuous at best, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. As I leaned against the door, I tried to gather my thoughts, but they were a jumbled mess of fear and confusion. The events of the night replayed in my mind like a movie. On repeat, Lila, the dark figure, the old man's chilling laughter. It all felt surreal, yet so vivid. I needed to convince myself it was just a nightmare. Taking a deep breath, I forced myself to move away from the door. My apartment felt strangely suffocating, as if the walls were closing in on me. I flipped on the lights, but even the bright glow seemed to cast long, sinister shadows. I glanced at my phone, half hoping to see a message from Lila. Something ground me in reality, but there was nothing. I sank onto my couch, trying to shake off the unease. I switched on the TV, searching for any distraction. News reports flickered across the screen. Halloween celebrations in full swing. People laughing, costumes, and decorations. Normalcy felt like a cruel joke after what I had just experienced. But then the news anchor mentioned something that made my heart race. Authorities are investigating a series of strange occurrences reported across the city tonight. Witnesses describe a shadowy figure that has been following individuals, leading to several disappearances. I switched off the TV, my skin crawling. Was this connected to my experience? Had I narrowly escaped something sinister? My hands trembled as I reached for my phone. The need to contact my friends overwhelmed me. I needed to talk to someone about what had happened, to make sure I wasn't going crazy. But before I could dial, I heard a soft knock on the door. Heart leaped into my throat, and I froze. The knock came again, a hesitant sound that made my pulse quicken. I glanced through the peephole, my heart pounding as I braced myself for whatever lay on the other side. To my surprise, it was a young woman. Her hair was tousled, and she wore a faded costume, one that seemed to match Lila's. Confusion washed over me. Could it really be her? I hesitated for a moment, then slowly opened the door. "Lila?" I asked, my voice shaky. Her eyes widened with relief as she stepped inside. "Thank God. I thought I'd never find you. I felt I'd never find you." I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but it was quickly replaced with confusion. "How did you? Where have you been?" "I don't know," she said, shaking her head. "I was lost, and then everything went dark. I thought I was going to be trapped forever." "Trapped? By what?" I asked, the memory of the shadow creeping back into my mind. Lila looked around the apartment, her expression haunted. "That thing, it followed me. I saw it again after I left your car. I was running, but it felt like it was always right behind me." A cold dread settled in my stomach. "It's real then," I murmured, feeling the weight of fear press down on me. She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. She wouldn't let me in. He just stood there, smiling that creepy smile. My stomach churned. "What do you mean? You saw him too?" "Yes," she exclaimed, stepping closer. "He told me I shouldn't have come here. It was like he knew I was being chased." We stood there, the weight of our shared terror enveloping us. I glanced at the door, half expecting the shadow to come crashing in at any moment. Maybe we should call the police, I suggested, though part of me doubted they would believe us. No. Lila grabbed my arm. What if they can't help? What if they get caught too? I opened my mouth to argue, but the look in her eyes silenced me. We had to do something, anything to protect ourselves. Just then, the lights flickered again, casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls. A chill crept through the apartment, and I shivered. Let's barricade the door, I said, rushing to grab furniture. Lila helped me push the coffee table against the door, her hands shaking. As we secured ourselves, I heard a noise outside. Soft, almost like a whisper. My heart raced as I pressed my ear against the door. Jake, Lila said, her voice a shaky whisper. What if it's already here? I stepped back, feeling the terror clawing at my insides. No, we can't think like that. We just need to stay quiet. We huddled together on the couch, our breaths shallow and fast. The world outside felt distant, as if we were the last to test. People left in a nightmare. Minutes passed like hours, the silence stretching between us. I could feel Lila's warmth beside me, a small comfort against the overwhelming fear. Then, suddenly, there was a loud bang on the door. I jumped, my heart racing as I turned to look at Lila. What was that? I don't know, she whispered, her eyes wide with fear. The banging continued, accompanied by a low, guttural sound that sent chills down my spine. It was as if something was trying to break in, to tear us apart. Get behind me, I said, my voice steadying despite the panic swelling inside. The door rattled violently, and I felt a surge of adrenaline. I grabbed a nearby lamp, ready to defend us against whatever lay beyond. But then, as suddenly as it started, the banging stopped. The silence that followed was suffocating. I strained to hear anything, but it was as if the world had held its breath. Jake. Lila's voice trembled. It's still there, she whispered, her eyes darting to the door. Just then, I noticed a shadow creeping beneath the door, dark and elongated. I felt my breath catch in my throat. Lila, it's not gone, I hissed, moving us away from the door. The shadow flickered, and I heard a low whisper, almost like a chant. Let me in, let me in. I could feel the panic rising in my chest as the shadow began to pulse, growing darker and more defined. Glanced around the room, desperate for something, anything that could help us. Then I remembered the kitchen. We need to get to the kitchen. I grabbed Lila's hand and pulled her toward the back of the apartment. As we reached the kitchen, I quickly grabbed a knife from the drawer, feeling the cold metal against my palm. We have to stay quiet and find a way out, I whispered, scanning the room for a window. But just then, the power went out, plunging us into darkness. I felt Lila's hand grip mine tighter, and I swallowed hard. I fumbled for my phone, turning on the flashlight. Beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the kitchen. But just as I scanned the room, I heard a loud crash from the living room, like furniture being thrown around. Jake, we can't stay here, Lila cried, her voice rising in panic. We have to find a way out, I said, my voice firm as I led her toward the back door. As we approached, I saw the faint outline of a figure standing in the shadows of the living room. I froze, the fear seeping into my bones. It was the old man from the gas station. His twisted smile widened as he stepped forward, the darkness swirling around him. You shouldn't have come here, he said, his voice echoing in the stillness. Get back, I shouted, raising the knife as a futile defense. But Lila grabbed my arm, pulling me away. We have to go. We sprinted toward the back door, my heart racing as I fumbled with the lock. The figure loomed closer, the shadows thickening around him. I turned the knob and flung the door open, the cool night air hitting my face like a breath of fresh hope. Go, go, I yelled, pushing Lila out ahead of me. We bolted into the darkness, the moon illuminating our path as we ran down the alley behind my apartment building. I could hear the old man's laughter echoing behind us, a sinister sound that made my skin crawl. As we turned a corner, we spotted a car parked on the street. Get in, I shouted, fumbling for my keys. Lila jumped into the passenger seat as I scrambled to unlock the door. I slid into the driver's seat, my hands shaking as I started the engine. Go, go, Lila urged, her eyes wide with fear as she glanced back at the alley. I slammed the gas pedal to the floor, and the car lurched forward, The streetlights blurred past us as I sped away from the apartment, desperate to put distance between us and whatever horror lurked behind. As we drove, the adrenaline coursed through me, but I could still feel the weight of fear pressing down on my chest. "What was that thing?" I asked, glancing at Lila. "I don't know," she said, her voice trembling, "but it felt like it was after us." I nodded, gripping the steering wheel tighter. "We need to find somewhere safe." I glanced at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the shadowy figure trailing us. But the road was empty behind us, the city lights flickering like distant stars. Lila took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "We should go to the police," she suggested. Her voice shaky but determined. I hesitated, remembering the old man's warning. What if they can't help? What if he knows we're coming? Her expression hardened. "We can't just keep running. We need to tell someone what happened." I nodded, realizing she was right. As much as I wanted to flee, I knew we had to confront whatever was hunting us. I turned the car toward the staff, nearest police station, hoping that the presence of law enforcement would provide the safety we so desperately needed. The station was just a few blocks away, its lights shining like a beacon in the dark as we pulled into the parking lot. Felt a flicker of hope. "We'll be safe here," I said, turning to Lila. But as we got out of the car, the atmosphere shifted again. The air felt charged, electric, and an unsettling feeling crept back into my gut. "Do you see that?" Lila whispered, pointing toward the shadows at the edge of the parking lot. I squinted into the darkness. There, lurking near the streetlight, was a figure. It was indistinct but undeniably familiar. The old man stood there, watching us with air, that same twisted smile. "Run," I shouted, grabbing Lila's hand and pulling her toward the entrance. We sprinted toward the station, my heart racing with every step. The door swung open as we reached it, and we rushed inside. The station was bustling with officers, the sounds of radios and chatter filling the air. I spotted a desk sergeant and rushed over, breathless. "You have to help us. We're being followed." The officer looked at us, concern etched across his face. "Slow down." "What do you mean?" The old man. "He's after us. We saw him at the gas station," Lila exclaimed, her voice frantic. The sergeant frowned, glancing over at the entrance. "You're safe here. Just take a breath." I turned to look outside, my heart in my throat. But the parking lot was empty now, the figure gone. "Please, we need you to believe us," I urged, desperation creeping into my voice. "He's dangerous." Just then, the sergeant's expression shifted, and he stood up. "Stay here," he instructed, heading toward the entrance. I felt a moment of panic. "No, don't go out there." But he pushed through the door, stepping into the night. Lila and I stood together, our hearts pounding. "What if he doesn't come back?" she whispered. I shook my head, trying to hold on to hope. "They'll be fine. They're trained for this." Moments passed like hours, the tension in the air thickening. Finally, the sergeant returned, his face pale. "There's no one out there," he said, shaking his head. "What?" I felt a wave of confusion wash over me. "He was just here." The officer's brow furrowed. "Look, I need you both to stay calm. Can you describe this man?" I took a deep breath, trying to collect my thoughts. He was old, with dark clothes and a twisted smile. He seemed to know us, to know we were running. The sergeant nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. "Let's get you both a safe place to sit. We'll take your statements." As we followed him deeper into the station, I couldn't shake the feeling that we hadn't escaped. The sense of being watched lingered, pressing down on me. "Do you think he's still out there?" I asked Lila quietly, glancing around as if expecting to see the old man lurking in the shadows. "I don't know," she said, her voice trembling. "But we can't let our guard down." We sat in a small room, the fluorescent lights buzzing. Overhead, the sergeant left us alone for a moment, and I turned to Lila. "What if we're not safe here?" "We have to be," she insisted, her expression fierce. "We just have to get through this." But deep down, I felt the shadow creeping back into my mind, a relentless reminder of the fear we had just faced. After what felt like an eternity, the sergeant returned with a notebook and pen. "All right, let's start from the beginning," he said, taking a seat across from us, as I began to recount the events of the night. The figure, the gas station, the old man. I noticed something out of corner of my eye, a flicker of movement outside the window. I turned, my heart racing, and saw a shadow slip past the glass. "Lila," I whispered, panic rising again. "What?" she asked, her eyes wide with fear. "It's him," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Just then, the lights flickered again, and the power went out. The room plunged into darkness. I could hear Lila's breath quicken beside me, and I felt the weight of dread settle around us. "Stay close," I whispered, my heart pounding in my chest. The door creaked open, and I felt a cold breeze wash over us. "Jake, Lila," a voice whispered, echoing in the dark. "Get away from us," I shouted, gripping the knife tightly in my hand. The door swung open fully, revealing the old man standing in the doorway, his silhouette backlit by the emergency lights. "You can't escape," he hissed, his smile stretching impossibly wide. The sergeant's voice broke through the darkness, commanding and authoritative. "Get back. I'll call for backup." But as the old man stepped forward, the air shifted again, thickening with a sense of malevolence. I felt Lila's hand grip mine tightly as we backed away, the room closing in around us. "Jake!" he cried, fear spilling over into panic. "Don't look at him," I shouted, trying to keep her focused on me. The old man's laughter echoed in the darkness, and I felt a cold breath wash over us, freezing me in place. "You're mine now," he whispered. Then suddenly, everything shifted. The world twisted, colors blurring, and I felt myself being pulled into the shadows. The sergeant's voice faded, replaced by the old man's sinister laughter. "No!" I screamed, fighting against the darkness that threatened to consume me. I could feel Lila beside me, her grip tightening, but the shadows enveloped us, dragging us into a void of cold and despair. And then, just like that, it was gone. I awoke in my car, parked on the side of a familiar street. The early morning sun creeping over the horizon. I blinked in disbelief, my heart racing as I looked around. Everything felt surreal. I glanced at the passenger seat. Empty. There was no sign of Lila, no trace of the events that had unfolded the night before. I stumbled out of the car, my mind racing. Had it all been a dream? The fear gnawed at my insides. I reached for my phone, frantically searching for any missed calls or messages. Nothing. As I stood there, the cool morning air brushing against my skin, I noticed something on the ground. An old, tattered piece of paper. I picked it up, my heart pounding. It was a note, scribbled in shaky handwriting. "You can never escape the shadows. They will always find you."
I looked around, half expecting the old man to
appear, lurking in the shadows. I rushed back to my car, slamming the door behind me. My mind raced with thoughts of Lila and the terror we had faced. I had to find her, to uncover the truth of what had happened. But as I drove away from that street, the shadows felt closer than ever, lurking just beyond my vision, waiting for the next opportunity to pull me back into their darkness. The road stretched out before me, and I realized that Halloween night was far from over. See? Shadows would always be there, hidden in the corners of the world, waiting for the right moment to emerge. And as I navigated the city, the weight of fear settled in my chest, a constant reminder that some horrors never truly fade. They linger, watching, waiting, and ready to ensnare anyone who dares to venture to